Welcome everybody to the final installment of GameSpot's next big game series all about No Man's Sky. So far this week, our own intrepid explorer Danny O'Dwyer has told us about the story behind the game, the gameplay within itself, and also the crazy scale of the universe. But now it's my turn. And for me, there's just one question that needs to be answered. How the bloody hell does it all work?
The way the universe is created in No Man's Sky, the way everything is created, is this term that we use, procedural, right? And we're like really picky about that. We say it's not random, right? Because random to me is this like chaotic kind of mess potentially. But procedural is like creating mathematical formulas, right? And they create a result. And the result is something that's like generated on the fly by the computer, but it's a result that hopefully looks correct, looks almost like it's been built by hand. So rather than planets just being randomly generated and us just picking, let's say, a color for a planet, right? One sky be red, and the next sky be blue, and the next sky be green, and the next sky be black, or whatever. You know, we don't do that, because random generation like that results in like an entirely red planet with an entirely red sky and looks terrible, right? So we create algorithms that do things like decide if a planet is the right distance from the sun. And if it is, then it would have water. And so we generate water on that planet, and that creates rivers, and it creates lakes and oceans potentially. But then it also creates moisture in the atmosphere. Then that will affect the color of the sky, because the wavelength of the light is being diffracted in different ways to create different colors, just like in our world.
Now for me, the key to the whole universe and to understanding how it all works is not to think about what happens when you're there, but instead to think about what happens when you're not there. Take the classic philosophical thought experiment. If a tree falls in the woods and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Now, in the real world, most of us would answer yes to this because of the physical makeup of our observable reality. However, in No Man's Sky, the answer is no. Because if no one's around, there is no tree, there is no woods, there is no planet. There's just nothing.
As you fly around the world in No Man's Sky, you might encounter, say, a mountain. And on that mountain there might be a tree or a particular rock beside the tree, right? And that is there, and that mountain is there, and that tree is there on top of the mountain because there is effectively a mathematical formula, and the result of that formula will always be the same. So when you go and visit that mountain, you will always see that tree there. And if another player goes and visits that same mountain, they will see that exact same tree in the exact same place. But it's not stored on the disk. It's not stored in the cloud. It's just generated there and then on the fly. When you fly away, we just throw that data away. We throw away that mountain, we throw away that tree. But if you fly back, it will be there again because it is just following this pattern.
So every time you go anywhere in No Man's Sky, you're essentially asking the game questions, math questions. And the beauty of math questions is the answer is always the same. So if you're the code of No Man's Sky and I ask you what's 45 plus 62, for example, the answer is always 107. Doesn't matter if I ask you now or next week or in a year from now, the answer will always be the same. As Sean put it, you can think of it as putting in inputs and getting out outputs.
So when you put in the same inputs, which is just, I am here at this point in the world, you will always get the same output, which is the mountain in that exact same position or the rock that's on top of that mountain, down to the like blade of grass. It will always be in the exact same place. If another player comes along and they input the same inputs, they will get the same output.
The standard way to create the stuff of video games is to have designers and artists build everything by hand. Terrain, creatures, trees, buildings, everything you see has been painstakingly crafted to a high level of detail. No Man's Sky handles detail differently, however. Once again, everything is generated.
We generate everything at different LODs, right, which is like level of detail. And level of detail is that thing that gamers are used to. You drive around GTA and you will see a low detail building suddenly pop in and become a high detail building. Ours don't pop, but we generate the entire planet at like quite a low level of detail. So when you look up and you see it kind of hanging there in the horizon, you can make out mountains and hills and canyons. And if you get into your ship and you fly into space and you fly towards that planet, as you get closer and closer to it, we will generate higher and higher detail. And as you come in to land on it, we begin to generate like the highest levels of detail.
But it's not just the details that No Man's Sky can generate, there's also variety. Pretty much everything you see, plants, trees, spaceships, and of course the wildlife too, is all unique. Each one is literally one of a kind in the entire universe. How? Well, it's kind of like a character creation menu. So each base piece in the world, be it a dinosaur or a tree or a spaceship or whatever, has the equivalent of little sliders for every characteristic. So for the game to create variety, all it needs to do is move them.
Our artist might create a cat, and from that cat they will also be creating every type of lion and every type of tiger, but also things that are much more kind of wild and mutated from that. All of those creatures, all of the ships that you see in the sky and the freighters and things like that, they're all following what we would call like a fractal pattern. So that means that creatures will go down to the water and drink some water and come back up to higher ground and perhaps eat some grass and go for a sleep or something like that. Some creatures will only come out at night, all of those sort of things. And they're just, again, following like a mathematical formula. So we don't simulate them. And that means that if you're on a planet and you see a creature doing something like that, and then you fly away and you come back, it will be a little bit further along that pattern, basically.
In the time I spent talking to Sean, one thing struck me over and over again about the world they're creating. Due to the layers and layers of simple algorithms, they've created a complicated and mathematically chaotic system, more so than the sum of its parts. And for me, this is the perfect example of chaos theory. Changing just one thing in the code has inherently unpredictable results. And this is both the challenge that they need to overcome, but also what gets me so excited about the future of No Man's Sky.
So I will make a rule that say there should be little flowers around the base of a tree, right? And I'll think that's a good rule. And then I like propagate that to the main branch, and suddenly there are flowers around the base of every tree on like every planet, right? And that's cool, except it has like horrible knock-ons, right? And I realized that I'm an idiot, that I'm not a god, right? And this was a terrible rule, and suddenly all the creatures are going crazy and they're trying to eat around the base of trees and they're eating flowers and things like that. And so yeah, you break the universe horribly because you have this ridiculous power. You've got loads of simple rules, they all each has a cause and effect, but you find it impossible to predict what they're going to result in because there's a whole bunch of them. Even just with like half a dozen rules, it suddenly becomes really hard to predict what's going to happen.